Oh, hey guys, last week I made a video comparing round-wound strings to flat-wound strings, and there was quite a bit of enthusiasm and great comments and a lot of views and everything. So I thought that I would follow up with it today because there was one problem with last week's video, is that when I compared the two types of strings, I used different guitars. And I realized that was an unfair comparison. I just happened to do it because I had those two guitars handy. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to play this guitar again. This is the Fender Road-Worn 50s Tribute Telecaster. I think I got it in 2015 used. And it's a great guitar. It really is. Nothing fancy, but very cool. And my Princeton reverb, I'm going to use the same settings on the Princeton reverb, same settings on the guitar, which is going to be both the volume and the tone controls all the way up. And all I'm going to do is play this tune, Yesterday's. It's solo guitar with my fingers, and then I'm going to change the strings and play them again with round-wound strings. Now, the top three strings are going to remain the same. They're 12, 16, 20 plain. The bottom three strings are going to be these flat wounds first, and then a set of 32, 42, 54 round wound strings. Both sets are Diodario, by the way. And I'll do my best to play it somewhat the same way both times so you can hear the differences in the feel and the tone of both kinds of strings in a fair comparison. So here is Yesterday's. Okay, I'll be right back with some round wound strings. Okay, here's Yesterday's with the round wound set. Okay, so there's the round wound set. I'm more comfortable with the round wounds. I'm more used to the sound that I get and the response that I get. I'd be very curious to see how they sit side by side. small things about the previous video and the discussion that was being had. There is some confusion, and I think generally misinformation about flatwound strings. A lot of people assume that flatwound strings are the original guitar strings and that roundwounds came later, but it's actually exactly the opposite. Until, well, from the very earliest days of archtop guitars, certainly they were steel string guitars. They typically used a Monel string, which is a roundwound string made of a particular alloy that Gibson particularly, and even Martin, used at the time. Bronze strings came a little later. And then Labella supposedly made flatwound strings or ground polished strings in as early as the early 40s, but they didn't really catch on until the late 40s, early 50s. So, for instance, Charlie Christian never used flatwound strings, and most recordings that happened particularly on electric guitar prior to the late 40s were roundwound strings as well, probably something like Monel strings. But then in the early 50s, flatwound strings were being marketed by a couple of different companies, and they caught on. And then they really became the sound of the mainstream jazz guitar players, people like Tal Farlow and Jimmy Rainey and others that were happening right at that time. And then later on, just about everybody used flatwound strings. There are some exceptions. Then later on again, people in the jazz world kind of went back to roundwound strings, and now it's kind of a mixed bag of whatever you like. So I just wanted to clear that up because there is a kind of notion that the original jazz guitar sound is flatwound strings, and it depending on what you consider to be the original sound, it didn't really start until the early 50s of being flatwounds being the typical string for jazz guitar players. Okay, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy it. Please feel free to comment, like, and subscribe, do all that YouTube-y stuff. All right, see you guys.